Hey, what's up everyone? I hope we're all having a great day. Today, I wanted to talk about my experience playing Overwatch. I'm a somewhat new player who only started playing after the launch of Overwatch 2 and never got to experience the glorious days of Overwatch 1. From what I've seen on YouTube, most Overwatch content creators are veterans who have been playing the game since the early days of Overwatch 1 and have been great at the game for years. You see tons of unranked GMs being done by top 500s and even players who have peaked rank 1 multiple times. And of course, in these unranked GMs, you see these amazing players tear through lower elos with ease and shoot up the ranks on new accounts, usually giving some tips and tricks here and there about how you can improve your gameplay and possibly replicate the results. As a player who only recently reached GM and had to go the long way and learn Overwatch 2 from the ground up, I wanted to share 6 thoughts on what I learned throughout the process of doing a quote-unquote real unranked GM. I started playing Overwatch 2 around the middle of Season 1 after I heard about Blizzard's brand new title, and I thought, hey, I should give it a try with a few of my friends. After all, it's free to play, so the worst case is if I don't like it, I can just uninstall. At the time, I actually thought that Overwatch 2 was a completely new game, and I wasn't aware that its entire existence was supposed to be justified by a groundbreaking PvE experience. The only other FPS games I had ever played seriously were Call of Duty and Battlefield, so Overwatch was a completely different kind of game to what I was used to. The first thing that was apparent to me as a new Overwatch player was that Overwatch is a hard game, both mechanically and strategically. Not only is Overwatch strategy difficult, but it is unique, in the sense that many of the habits you form in other FPSs aren't enough to make you a good Overwatch player. You can't rely on just shooting what appears in front of you. Although the enemies often come from predictable directions, you have to make decisions about where to shoot from and who to shoot, and also you have to worry about how the enemy will fight back, which varies greatly depending on who they're playing and what you're playing, and all that only scratches the surface. Overwatch is arguably the most mechanically challenging FPS in the competitive shooter scene right now. Unlike most shooters, Overwatch doesn't have any inertia when characters are strafing, which means you can change directions instantly as long as you're on the ground, and when coupled with the already quick movement, this can make tracking feel impossible. Not only because the enemies move really unpredictably, but also because your character is strafing quickly as well. And in addition, many heroes have extremely small hitboxes and/or movement abilities. And if that's not enough, you also have to deal with insane amounts of healing and damage mitigation, which means not only do you have to land your shots, you have to land them quick enough before the enemy can react. Your first priority should be to master the fundamentals. Don't worry about any crazy strats. If you're a beginner, you should focus on figuring out how not to completely throw your games. As a beginner, I spent a lot of my time looking for educational content, trying to master the fundamentals as quickly as possible. I started watching unranked GMs and replays because I assumed that they would show what I had to do in order to get better. Some of the first I watched came from creators like Metro, Highway, Samido, Craggy, Defran, ML7, etc. And for some reason, I discovered that stream re-uploaders really liked re-uploading clips from this guy named Gale and this other guy named Sure4. The videos were entertaining to watch, but watching high-level play doesn't necessarily translate to learning the basics. The fundamentals tend to get hidden behind the flashy plays and insane mechanics, so it's not really obvious what you should be paying attention to. I found 3 specific content creators to be particularly helpful when I was starting out. They were Spylo, A10, and Awkward. Spylo primarily does coaching content where he analyzes the gameplay of players second by second and highlights in detail their mistakes. I found this to be really helpful at eliminating the silly mistakes that I was making in my own gameplay, and taught me not to autopilot, and to consider every micro decision that I was making. A10 features several truly educational unranked GMs on his channel, creating literal slideshows teaching high-level abstract Overwatch concepts. His teaching style in these videos is less specific but still detailed, going over concepts such as space, corners, cooldowns, flow, and more. A10's videos really helped me understand the high-level elements of Overwatch and what it really means to make plays. Awkward takes a very different approach to his educational philosophy, at least within his unranked GMs. Rather than approaching the game from a complex viewpoint and simplifying it, Awkward presents the game as fundamentally simple and invites you to simply apply its principles and figure out the details in your own game. Watching his unranked GMs, it becomes fairly obvious pretty quickly what those principles are.
I'm going to do damage. Where is the damage? Damage before the fight! Just damage. Amplify my damage. When I get shot, I use cover. He pushed forward, I went back, take cover. I gotta do damage now. I am doing damage. But Awkward, your healing is low. Who cares? I utilize off angles.
I found Awkward's videos helped me to trust the basics and not overthink too much. The third thing that I learned is that mechanics matter a lot. Having great mechanics is preferable to having great game sense. This point might sound controversial and might even sound contrary to my previous point, but let me explain. My previous point emphasized that you have to learn how not to throw your games and learn concepts that can be applied universally across all games of Overwatch. When I talk about game sense, I'm talking about being able to optimize your decision making in more specific scenarios that may be specific to certain games of Overwatch. And while it is certainly a useful skill, I think it is often overemphasized, especially for beginners. I like to think about FPS mechanics like aim and movement to be analogous to combos in fighting games. While technique alone doesn't make you a great player, I think it's silly to even think about high-level strategy before you have the skills to execute anything meaningful. Suppose you're hard stuck at whatever rank and you understand that to get out of that rank, you need to improve something about your gameplay, whether that be mechanics or game sense. What I'm saying is that if you could only pick one, you would climb faster by improving your mechanics versus improving your game sense. Being a dumb 35% accuracy soldier is better than being a smart 15% accuracy soldier. Going on a great flank and hitting none of your shots is worse than sitting in the backline and hitting all of your shots. If you care about ranking up, practicing your aim is something that will greatly benefit you. The reason I'm highlighting this point is because if you, like me, watched a lot of educational unranked GMs, you can get the impression that by simply playing smarter, you too can reach GM. And this is simply not what I experienced. At the end of the day, Overwatch is a shooter, and you need to hit your shots in order to get value. On the days where I practiced my aim and warmed up my aim, I won more games, and on days where I got lazy and just jumped in a comp with awful tracking, I lost more games. How you practice your aim is a conversation for another time. You can do it in a dedicated aim trainer, using game trainers in the workshop, playing quick play, or even by looking for ways to challenge your aim in ranked. Regardless of how you think it's done, you should always be practicing your aim, and the more you practice, the faster you'll find progress in your gameplay. My fourth point is that the more you rely on your team, the slower your progress will be. I think this is a common problem that a lot of people overlook. You constantly hear about people who say that they can't climb because their teammates suck. They're making the quote-unquote right plays, but their team just can't do anything half the time. The truth is, having a playstyle that centers around simply enabling your teammates and not making too many mistakes yourself will limit you to at most around a 60% win rate, and even if you make 0 mistakes. The reasoning boils down to probability. Assume you're as good as you say you are. There is still some probability that any given player in your elo who isn't yourself will throw. There's 4 of those players on your team and 5 of those players on the enemy team. The odds are in your favor, but only slightly, so while you can climb with a teammate-reliant playstyle, it'll be very slow. There just aren't enough resources at your disposal to really stop a throwing teammate from throwing the game. That's why you see Lifeweaver unranked GMs usually taking way longer than, say, a Baptiste unranked GM. It all boils down to impact. If you can consistently secure eliminations yourself, whether that be through amazing mechanics or amazing game sense or a mix of both, you will have a much easier time climbing. The best way to counter your throwing teammates is by taking advantage of the throwers on the enemy team. And I find that this is true regardless of rank. People commonly think that if by some miracle they could get to a higher rank, their enabling playstyle will finally start working, but it just doesn't work like that. You have to remember that as you climb, not only do your teammates get better, but your enemies also get better. Enabling a silver player against other silver players is going to get you roughly the same results as enabling a masters player against other masters. The likelihood that your teammates throw doesn't change, and therefore neither does your win rate. I find that the best stat that indicates whether or not you're carrying your games is the number of eliminations, not your damage or your healing. My fifth point is that you should always be willing to challenge your own ideas about the game. It's often tempting to stick to what feels natural or to stick to what you're familiar with, but this kind of mentality will lead to you getting hard stuck. Chances are, if you're not at the highest levels of play already, there's very likely many things you're getting wrong, which explains partially why you aren't at the highest levels of play in the first place. In order to get more experience, you need to experience more things, and to do that, you need to be willing to experiment with how you approach the game. Don't assume that you know better, and don't even assume that you know how to correct your own mistakes, because you probably don't. Let the results speak for themselves. If you change something about your gameplay, but you aren't winning more games, it doesn't matter how smart you think you are. The simple fact is what you changed obviously isn't working, and you should be willing to try something else. If you focus on being flexible and adaptable, you will learn much faster and therefore be able to climb the ranks. Think of ranked like trying to solve increasingly difficult problems. If what you're doing isn't solving the problem, don't keep doing it. you probably don't know what to do, but do something else, anything else, and you will be closer to making progress. Maybe what you do doesn't work, or maybe it even makes your problem worse, but at least you have more information so that hopefully you'll have a better idea about what to do next. My last point is don't let your emotions get the better of you. I think we've all experienced our fair share of emotional players in our games, and maybe that person is you. While you don't exactly need to be a monk to climb, staying focused on not letting your emotions get the better of you will make your ranked journey not only more successful, but I think more enjoyable. The fact is, no matter what, sometimes you're going to be on the losing team. If you're the kind of person who gets angry every time something isn't going your way, you're going to lose more games than you would otherwise have to. It's okay to care about winning, but typing tank diff isn't going to help you win. It's not going to make your tank do more damage, and it's not going to make your tank play better. If anything, it's only going to make them play worse. If you really care about winning, it's advisable not to spend half of your games typing. I'm not saying that you can't notice that you have a bad team. Sometimes you're even going to have bad teams 10 games in a row, and it's happened to me plenty of times. And if you let yourself tilt or get discouraged, it'll only hold you back. Sometimes you get unlucky, but that doesn't mean you can't still find ways to improve yourself as a player. If you really care about improving, you should focus on your long-term results and not individual games. Play in order to get better instead of playing to win. In my experience, the best way to play is without any communication at all. Depending on communication simply causes you to become more reliant on your team. Telling your teammates what to do is very likely just going to end up with your team arguing with each other or cause them to do the exact opposite of what you said so that they can prove you wrong. How many times has yelling at your team to switch actually worked in your favor? Shouting random things in a team fight almost never leads to actual results, and even if you're communicating genuinely useful information, there's a good chance that it's going to cause your teammates to misinterpret that information and misplay. Shouting "Soldier 1" doesn't mean the same thing as "Please run a soldier and die," but that seems to be how it's interpreted most of the time. To summarize, here are my 6 points. Overwatch is a hard game. Master the fundamentals, practice your mechanics, don't rely on your team, challenge yourself, and don't get too emotional. And that's all I have to say for now. If you made it this far, I want to thank you for watching and consider subscribing if you like this kind of content. I want to clarify that I'm not presenting these points as hills I'm going to die on. I simply want to voice my experience of Overwatch as of October 2023. Let me know what you think. If you disagree, I would love to know why. And even if you don't disagree, but you think I missed something, or just feel that you have something to add to the conversation, I would also love to know.